Welcome everybody to the Sunset Beach Town Council September 21st meeting. Would everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Does any member of council have a conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest with regards to any item on the agenda? If so, please state at this time. Mr. Borman?
No.
Mr. Corbett?
No.
Mr. Phillips?
Nope.
Ms. Harris?
No.
And Mr. Nern?
No.
All right. Moving on. Amendment and approval of draft agenda. Does anyone have anything that needs to be added or anything that needs to be questioned?
No.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Harris?
No.
Okay, everybody's good on that. All right, moving on. Council discussion. Councilman Nern, you told me you needed to say a couple things. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to thank the town and the Committee to Honor America's Veterans for putting on the 9/11 ceremony. It was a very fitting and proper ceremony. And for those of you that didn't see it or have knowledge of this, our longtime town resident and former council member Lou DeVita was able to secure a piece of steel from the World Trade Center, and that will be made be mounted permanently in some fashion in the park, so we never forget. October is a busy month for the town. October 2nd, we have Sunset at Sunset Festival. That's the town's big festival. The committee has done a fantastic job this year. I hope everybody can make it. October 10th is the Band Fest put on by Plausibility. And that's always a good time. They're a big fundraiser. I hope everybody can make it. And October 24th is the Old Bridge Historical Society. It used to be called the Strawberry Wine Festival, but couldn't have it in spring. But it's also a good time, and the Old Bridge group does such a great job. So I hope everybody will be able to attend all three of those events and celebrate the town of Sunset Beach.
That all, Mr. Nern. Mr. Borman, you have anything?
Nothing else.
Ms. Harris, you have anything?
Nothing.
Mr. Corbett?
Nothing.
Mr. Phillips? All right. Moving on. Public comments on agenda items only. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Do I have anyone that's here for the agenda items comments? So please step to the mic and name and address, please.
Hello,
Katie.
good morning. Katie Hovermail, 1429 Bay Street, Sunset Beach. I'm going to speak to two items on the agenda, 5A and 5B. I'm going to start with 5B, the parallel parking for low-speed vehicles. I'm just wondering if this is going to create open a can of worms, so to speak, but create more difficulty for the police. Obviously, Chief Claymore can answer that, but I'm wondering about if golf carts are allowed to pull in nose first into parking spaces, does that account for the double and triple linked golf carts? And I'm very concerned about golf carts because I was one of those probably many residents who came very close to killing occupants of a golf cart because an 8-year-old driving it failed to stop at the stop sign. Still shaking over that. As far as 5A goes, the dredging project, the bid results that have come out, I'm not living on the canals, but I'm probably not the only taxpayer that is concerned about the rising cost of the dredging project and whether grant funds will cover this. And if not, and if the residents who benefit from the dredging project, who live on the canals, cannot cover the cost, will that cost then come back to all of the residents of Sunset Beach? So I'm very concerned about that rising cost. And related to that point is the fact that I'm a taxpayer that voted for Jan Harris when she ran for council because I believe in Jan and I know she does her research and she questions a lot of things. And I have the feeling after watching council and watching on YouTube that Ms. Harris has not given the chance to speak, to address these questions enough time. I'm sorry, I'm saying this with as much respect as possible, but it seems like those of you on the council, non-female, not scratch that, those of you on the council, some of you on the council come with your minds made up ahead of time and you don't allow for enough discussion. That is the appearance I gather from that. And Mr. Phillips, I voted, you were so nice to talk to when you were running for election, and I voted for you because I was looking for someone to control the council, which you've done a good job of. But I think it's time to follow Robert's Rules of Orders closely and make sure that everyone on council has a chance to speak their mind and that you discuss the items, even though it might not be palatable to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Katie. Next, do I have anyone else?
Rich Serrato, 517 Twisted Oak Lane. It's apparent that we need greater transparency regarding the status and the cost of the dredging project. With Lisa's assistance, I have been attempting to obtain the following. Has the town received approval from DCM and the USACE for the routing pipeline from South Jinks Creek through Tubbs Inlet? Has the town received approval for the second navigational channel in the Bay Area from DCM and the USACE? Lisa presently is attempting to provide the public records when the second channel in the Bay Area was added to the program that should have been separately identified, publicly discussed, along with a vote by the council. Also, Lisa provided me the one mechanical bid totaling $7.2 million. And I have recently requested the hydraulic bid. I sent an email to Lisa last night, which I believe is nearly $1.8 million. If you include the cost, along with the consulting fees and the legal fees, the cost is nearly $10 million. If I recall, the grand total of the grant was $5.6 million, with the town paying 1/3 of this cost. These questions need to be answered. They say that confusion is created to suppress reality. And I realize the deadline is very close, but we need clarity on these issues. And Ms. Havermill is correct. The canal owners are concerned because the last time we put out an update to the citizens on this project was nearly 3.5 years ago. And that was the last communication from this town. This needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Okay. Not. Moving on. Moving on to old business, the dredging project, mechanical dredge bid results. Mr. Hobbs?
Yes, sir. In front of your desk, there's this chart here. That's the preliminary bid tabulation from the bids that were opened back on September 15. Received one bid, as you can see, from TD Ewer. The bids are higher than were anticipated, so we asked the consultant to go back to that one contractor and negotiate what he could in an attempt to get the number down. And so, except for to report that we hope to make a better report on October 4, this is where we are. So no recommendation other than the bids are high. We've asked the consultant to negotiate a better price.
Does any member of council have any questions?
No, sir.
All right,
I have one.
go
Just,
ahead, sir.
does this have an impact on the hydraulic contract
Uh,
that is already,
No,
Been
sir,
processed?
they're two separate pieces. No,
Okay.
sir.
and the hydraulic contract is still on track?
Yes, I understand the paperwork's together and they have yet to walk it across the hall for me to sign from yesterday afternoon, was it? So we hope to get that signed by the end of the week, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
So the only signature remaining is yours?
I believe that's right. And probably Tara's from finance, but yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions? All right, thank you, sir. Moving on, next up is our amendment ordinance 7211, parallel parking, low-speed vehicles. Chief Claymore.
Good morning. I'd like to start by echoing Ms. Hormel's concerns about the low-speed vehicles. I think myself, other members of the police department, and council members would agree that there are some things that happen on the island with low-speed vehicles that we work hard to prevent. And an eight-year-old operating a low-speed vehicle is very much a concern. And there is a law, a North Carolina general statute, that prohibits that. And we do our best to try to enforce those things as we see them. Several months ago, we talked about some options to allow for more parking on the island, because this has been a conversation since I've moved to Sunset Beach. One of which was exceptions for low-speed vehicles, which you have here in front of you. The ordinance, as it reads, and I'm not going to read it all, just in part, under 72.11 for parallel parking, reads, no person shall stand or park a vehicle in a street or alley that is paved other than parallel with the edge of said street or alley. In the next paragraph, the first sentence reads, on unpaved streets, no person shall stand or park a vehicle in a street or alley other than parallel with the edge of said street or alley. And then if you go to the third paragraph at the end, the last sentence reads, in addition, double parallel parking is prohibited at all times and at all places. My suggestion to create additional parking, if you will, because we see golf carts, low-speed vehicles that often double parallel or park perpendicular to the roadway. I'm asking council make an exception to 7211 for low-speed vehicles to allow them to park perpendicular with the roadway and allow double parallel parking of low-speed vehicles. The double parallel would still, the vehicles would still have to park in the same direction as the flow of traffic, as it mentions in 7211 now in the paragraph, in third paragraph, unless indicated to the contrary, parking on the left side of the street or alley opposing the direction of lawful traffic movement is prohibited. That would still be enforced. As far as vehicles, low-speed vehicles parking perpendicular to the roadway, they would have to be completely off the pavement, similar to what they do now when they park parallel. If you think about a low-speed vehicle backing onto Main Street, it's really no different than a motor vehicle backing out of a driveway onto Main Street. It's just not going to build up quite as much speed as a motor vehicle could. The sole intention here is just to create some additional parking on the island by allowing the low-speed vehicles to take up less of a footprint, because they do, for the most part, the four-seaters take up a smaller footprint than a motor vehicle does. So that is before you for consideration. That is my recommendation.
Council, got questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead, Tom.
So when we talked about this originally, the last time you were suggesting this, I thought you were talking about parallel parking to the roadway, not perpendicular. So the concern of one of the residents has stated there are different lengths, and the part that would stick out in the back obviously would be the one that they can't see. And what's going to stop them from exceeding the safety distance to someone's property, so that they don't pull up into the property, or that they're not sticking out into the bike lane or something like that?
as I mentioned, the carts would have to be completely off the roadway to park perpendicular with the road. If they're unable to do that without driving onto someone's property or without sticking out into the bike lane, it would be similar to what we do every week throughout the entire summer, enforcement and education. And same way, I'm sure the question's going to come up. How do we get the word out? How do we tell people that this is okay? How do we tell people with motor vehicles that it's not okay? Because if I'm driving a dually and I see a golf cart parked perpendicular to the road, and I assume that my F350 can do the same thing, and I do it, only through enforcement and education is the way we're going to get the word across. And it's a continuous process throughout the summer. We go out there on changeover day, Saturday, Sunday, and we make contact with 5, 6, 7 people and tell them, oh, you can't park this way. You need to park this way. They're good for the next 6 days. But then the following Saturday, a brand new group of people come in and they do the exact same thing. So again, we're making contact, putting notices on windshields, telling them, don't do this, do that. And it's good for the next 4 or 5 days while they're still in town. And then when they leave, we're right back to square one doing the same thing that we've done. The message board, we'll have a message that's displayed on there. We'll put it on social media, post it on the website, try to get as much information out as we can now in the off season so that hopefully when people come during season, we've reached as many people as we possibly could. Those that park in violation will be addressed as we have every summer. Because we still see that even without this exception now, we see vehicles parked perpendicular to the road. We see them double parked. We see them parked out into the bike lane, blocking driveways. It's a broken record every single season. And if we only had the same people come year after year after year, we might be able to gain compliance and go an entire year without writing a parking ticket. But we get people from all over the world that come to Sunset Beach, and I think that's great. But it's a challenge. It's a constant constant effort by our people to get out there and educate and enforce the best that we can. And it's going to be no different whether council agrees to this exception or not. We're still going to be faced with that enforcement and education throughout the summer.
Still think it's a challenge, but
So one of my concerns is we're already having an issue where we're having to address this on a weekly basis with people coming through. If we increase potentially the ability to have more low-speed vehicles park, in essence, in my mind, we might be making the problem worse because we're inviting more people to try to do this. So from my perspective, the can of worms is already out of the bag with low-speed vehicles. I would just as soon not have them, and just because that would simplify the code, enforcement, all that stuff. I don't know that increasing the amount of parking for them is the answer. I think it would increase the amount of education you have to do and things of that nature as well. I've been over the bridge all summer and seen low-speed vehicles, golf carts going over the bridge, and I understand it's all about enforcement and education, but there's a line of cars 15 deep, 20 deep behind this one vehicle, and then as soon as they get the opportunity, they will try to go around them as quickly as they possibly can, and not always in a nice way. So I think in some level, having the low-speed vehicles in the golf cart, increasing the amount of them and amount of space for them just is going to increase the problem.
I do remember a conversation we had several months ago when at that time I was also recommending, or not recommending at that time, but brought up for discussion the option that council has to enact an ordinance to permit golf carts separate and aside from low-speed vehicles. And I know that was kind of dead in the water. But this was something that council said, let's look at a change to the parking only, not to increase the amount of low-speed vehicles. Could this increase the amount of low-speed vehicles we see on the island? I don't know. Time would tell.
I would sort of just add that it was, you added, in addition to letting the regular, not low-speed vehicle golf carts come onto the island, you added looking at the option of parking. And the council said, no, we don't want the low-speed, we don't want the golf carts. Any low-speed vehicles should be the ones that are licensed and equipped for operation on the road. And we agreed for you to come back today with a proposal for parking.
Correct.
Okay. Um, it appears to me that we still have a big problem with education and enforcement of parking on the island, even under the rules that we have. And if we take and put a set of exceptions in those parking rules, it will just further complicate the process. I think the citizens of Sunset Beach, the regular visitors, will know what's going on. But that weekly turnover of people, not just with the low-speed vehicles, but also the visitors who come with regular vehicles looking for a place to park, will continually be confused. And just seeing that the low-speed vehicles are able to double parallel park, or park perpendicular, will send a message to the visitors in regular vehicles that it must be okay to park like that. So I think that would double your enforcement and an education problem.
It may,
I think it complicates overall. We have safety problems that were mentioned: underage, not wearing seat belts. You also have open containers. It's nearly impossible for the police to prevent that, to enforce that, unless they're actually physically there to see it happen. At least with the parking, there's a chance to drive by and see that there's a violation. That violation will take place over a period of a number of hours. But the enforcement and on low-speed vehicles, parking as well as operation is extremely difficult, and I don't think it's been particularly successful. And I think changing the parking rules for them will just complicate parking on the island and make a difficult situation even more difficult. So I really don't like the idea of changing the parking rules. I'd also like to point out, under 7211, which I hadn't read carefully in quite a while, the second paragraph take that back, the first paragraph, reference, you must, you're talking about the direction of lawful movement, and with the left side of the vehicle at least 3 feet from the edge of the pavement, unless otherwise indicated or marked. I dare say there's rarely been any enforcement of the full-size vehicle or the golf cart having to be parked 3 feet away from the pavement. So one of the things to look at in the future is maybe modify that. That's something you can enforce. We don't enforce around here. So, just in that parallel parking, I don't like the idea of changing the low-speed vehicles, and you might want to look at that 3 feet clause.
yes, sir. That's something that, we could talk about today, and while this is in front of you, to modify 7211, if the council's so inclined.
Well, my view is we have challenges all the time in having rules and codes that we either cannot or do not enforce. And the 3 feet away from the pavement seems to be clearly one that we do not enforce. And I think given the space that we have, it would be almost impossible to do that. That would pretty much
Likely.
eliminate lots of the parking on the island. So I think that should be removed. But I am against changing the rule for low-speed vehicles to park perpendicular or double parallel park. That's my dime.
I don't want to see the parking rules changed. I think it would just add too many problems. I prefer enforcement over education. Paying a fine is a good educational tool. If an adult has to rent one of these golf carts from these companies, correct?
frequently happens, yes. Some people
Uh,
bring their own.
And if that, say, a parent rents a golf cart and then lets a child under the age where they can have a driver's permit, who then is responsible? Who gets the ticket if you were to issue one?
Depends on the age of the operator of the vehicle and what the violation is that we stopped for. I mean, if it's
Well,
an 8-year-old, as Mrs. Holvermail stated, it's something we're going to address with the parents. And if we have a 14, 15-year-old, that child may be cited into juvenile court. There's also, we could cite the parent for permitting or allowing that person to operate unlicensed.
well, I think this is such a big problem. It's such a dangerous problem that I think everybody should be ticketed. Or the person responsible should be ticketed. I don't even like the ideas of the non-street ready golf carts being out there. So I'm going to say I'd like to see, other than street ready golf carts, be banned from the island. And I'd like to see tickets written, and I would not change the parking regulations.
You done, Mr. Nerd?
Mhm.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything?
I agree with all that's been said. I am opposed to the double parking, or however you want to define that, for golf carts. I think we already have too many golf carts on the island as it is, and to me that would just attract even more. So I am in agreement with all that's been said by the other councilmen, and I too am opposed to it.
No one has any further questions. I think it's pretty obvious, but we'll call it. Does anyone have a motion to change this to the parallel parking or the perpendicular parking that is brought forward?
I would just like to address what Councilman Corbett mentioned as well about the 3 feet from the edge of the pavement. I think that's something that we should look at modifying in this particular code. Being a person that parks over there on the side of the road, it'd be almost impossible to park anywhere over there if that were truly enforced. So if we're not going to enforce it, I think it should be stricken from the code as well.
Is there, I'm sure this code was written before you became chief.
Yes.
Is there any reason that we should keep that 3-foot rule in there if we don't or can't enforce it?
This code is written for the entire town of Sunset Beach. If we change it, it allows people to park just off of the paved portion of the roadway throughout the entire town.
Do you enforce people outside of the island, let's say?
We do right parking.
unless-
We do enforce parking outside of the island, yes, sir. If that's what you're asking.
Well, the 3 feet, well, yeah.
To my knowledge, it should be enforced as written. I can't say for certain that there's been a citation issued for a person being less than 3 feet off the roadway. I'd venture to say no. But I'd have to pull citations to be certain.
Would it be worth taking a look at amending it so that there's a separate condition for the island? I mean, I think we pretty much all agree that there's just no space to park 3 feet from the asphalt in the great majority of the places on the island, along Main Street, Canal Drive, North Shore. There might be a way to word it to keep the control in there on the mainland, but clarify that the island has different conditions.
I personally would feel comfortable removing it altogether because I don't know of any place throughout town where parking off of the pavement less than 3 feet is a safety concern. I think that if the vehicle is completely off of the roadway and it allows safe passage of vehicles, no matter what size, then if it's parked in the same direction of travel, that it's parked safely. I don't see that 3 foot is a hard and fast rule that needs to continue to stay in the ordinance. My opinion. It's a council decision though.
Anyone else got anything? If not, everybody good? Do I have a motion that we amend 7211 to take this, the parallel, or not parallel park, the 3 foot off of this amendment?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
I,
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Do we have to vote on specifically the parking, low-speed vehicle parking?
Mm-mm.
No.
Okay, so let's go forward with it.
Okay.
All right. Before we go to this next one, Lisa, I just want to ask you something. I just thought about this. When we done our amendment and approval of draft agenda, we did not have a motion and a second to that. Do we need to go back and do that to cover that? Or we're fine? Okay, so everything's fine. All right, just want to make sure. Thank you. Next up is our nonprofits at the concert series discussion. During the July 12th, 2021, Town Council reviewed the below and attached thing, and it goes basically into saying where we had the nonprofits come in asking about doing a fundraising at the events as we done our Sunset Soundwave concerts, and it was directed to now. So we need to see what the council's thinking in regards to this. Does any member of council have anything to start with?
Well, I think any opportunity for our nonprofits to raise funds is a good thing. I don't know about managing it. And if you follow the Ocean Isle Beach permit application, it's like 6 pages long. Is this what we would do? How are we going to decide? And this is, I wouldn't want to have to fill this out.
There's another difference with the Ocean Isle application. The Ocean Isle nonprofit program is run by their POA, not by the town. I got that right?
I think it's now run by the town.
Page 1 under Ocean Isle Beach, first bullet, recently taken over by town. Oh, by town. There you go. Thank you. I'm learning how to read. So I'll go just to the second part of that. It is very complicated. How do we manage it? How do we determine which charities? What kind of limits do we put on them? Who on town staff runs those activities? How is it actually conducted? I think, let me check again. They do it at intermissions. For the most part, our concerts do not have intermissions. We've found that intermissions give an opportunity that a large number of people start leaving early. And the momentum of the concert kind of slows down. And with that, it changes the tone of things. So we'd have to think carefully whether we want to do intermissions. And then the one complaint that I heard from some people, not everybody, a lot of people came prepared to pony up when the previous organization that was running the concerts were doing it. They would have the charity representatives come by during the intermission and with a bucket and sell raffle tickets. So, and by the end of the season, there were some residents that were kind of grumbling about every time they come to the free concert, somebody's coming through asking them to pony up money. So those are all things I think we should consider to do that.
I mean, to me, the administrative task is the real question. Does the town have any response to the challenges that would present and the time it would take and how they would manage having someone?
To take in the applications and decide whether it makes sense or not.
I think that council will just have to be very specific about the criteria and how you wanted it to be so that we could develop a specific plan so that we could follow it to make it, it has to be very clear of what the direction is and how we select who's coming. Like Ocean Isle, they have to be directly benefiting Ocean Isle. So basically they have an address for Ocean Isle and that money directly benefits their town. That's one of their specific criteria that kind of narrows it down for them of how they do their selection. And then as far as like managing it there, it would require another staff member to be there to make sure that whoever is doing this is following what rules council puts down in place for them to follow.
So if it's a county-wide or a statewide charity, they won't allow it?
Not Ocean Isle. I mean, that's not
Well,
that's
the
not
only
like a
one that allows
statute
it.
or anything. That's just
Okay.
that's how they handle it. That's how Ocean Isle handles it. When I talk to them, they have to be part of Ocean Isle and directly benefit Ocean Isle.
That is pretty limited.
Yeah. So what you said also in that statement there, Oak Island, Southport, and Holden Beach do not allow nonprofits. Calabash is run by the Merchants Association. Your fact sheet doesn't say whether the Merchants Association there allow nonprofits.
They didn't when I didn't talk to the Merchants Association. I talked to the town.
Yeah.
And they didn't have involvement in it, so they didn't know if they were going to.
Is there flexibility to do something rather than running around collecting? Is have the
I believe it-
nonprofit set up a tent, and so we could announce that there's a nonprofit there. It's over at this tent, and encourage everybody to go to the tent to make a donation if they want, rather than what we did in the past, walking through. I mean, they're options, I think.
I think that option has some legs to it, because then you're not, as you said, in front of everybody's face during intermission and things like that. Seeing how we don't have intermission, I think if it were to just be announced at the beginning of the concert, that there's a tent over here, people could go visit if they wanted to see, learn about what they're doing, and potentially donate, that sort of thing. I think that would be a good way to go about it if we went that route. As far as picking like the number, how many concerts are we looking to roughly?
14.
14
This year.
So, you could put out applications for, you could either do it one per event. If we don't get enough, you could start to rotate like Ocean Isle does. Or you could just limit it to 5 or 3, and then you just rotate through those 3. And that way those people will know the rules. You're not having to re-educate 14 different groups. You're only having to educate 3 groups or 4 groups, and they come back and they already know the rules, and they've been through the process. Just some thoughts.
If anything was going to go, it would definitely have to be something like that where they're off to the side. But still, that does not take anything off the staff. They're still going to go through the same thing of having to permit them, having to check, make sure that they are exactly who they are, that it is a legitimate nonprofit. So we're not going to take anything off staff. We're just going to be adding there. So
And that's where maybe coming back to limiting the number of charities per year would be a way to do that, because then the staff's not processing 14 and having to do all that. They're processing 4 or 5 sort of thing. And if you had more than, let's say you decide to do 5 charities, you had more than that apply, you pick them out of the hat for that year. And that's how you do it. And it's just luck of the draw who gets that year.
another thing, would we be looking at just somebody that's going to, or charities that are actually going to benefit Sunset, or would we going to be widespread? We'd have to come up with that idea.
Yeah, that would be one of my main concerns is the criteria for who we choose, because it really has to be specific so that, that would be a stressor for staff to have to be like without a criteria from council that's very specific of how we choose who it is. Like, I mean, there's nonprofits out there for everything. So, I mean,
So
One of the items,
I was going to say, just as a council, before we get into like the nitty gritty details, is the council as a whole amenable to trying to figure out a way to work this into our concerts or not before we go into the details? And because if council's not willing to really work at it and try to figure it out, then there's no point in going down to these kind of details at this point.
What is the council's view on that? Are we to entertaining this, to go forward with this, to look into more things, or are y'all content with not allowing and just being done with it
Yeah,
at
I
this
think we
time?
should
What
look
do you
into
think we
it.
need to do?
what does Councilwoman Harris say?
I'll get her. You go ahead. Any the ones that's here? Anybody
I'd like to support
entertain it?
and entertain this idea.
Mr. Corbett,
I would support finding a way to do it.
Mr. Nern, you said you
So
were.
would,
Mr.
Yeah, I
Borman,
think supporting.
Ms. Harris, what is
nonprofits
your
a good
stance on
idea.
this, ma'am?
I'm in favor of it.
Okay. All right. So that being said, I guess we'll go forward with that, looking into it. But do we want to go through and discuss all this at this time, or do we want to give the staff time to come back and bring some stuff to us to look at?
I'd like to volunteer to come up with a list of options in order that can be broken down and things we can do that council have the opportunity to look at, potentially discuss, think about, and just have literally question one, have a couple options we can pick from, question two, a couple options, and that way it's just an organized fashion. Then when we're done with it, we won't take 2 hours of going around to figure it out.
Yeah.
It can be done quickly.
All right.
Is anybody okay with that?
Yep.
Same
yeah.
time. Ms. Harris, everybody good?
I'm good.
I just have one point. You mentioned the address bit. One of the problems that we have, nonprofits based in Sunset Beach, if they have a post office box, it all says Ocean Isle Beach.
yes.
So, that's not a good criteria for
So,
determining which one is a
Looking-
Sunset Beach if that happens.
so
to
what
come
we
up.
can do is some of these concerns, I'll send an email out through Lisa to kind of give council an idea of when to reply to me with their concerns and things that should be addressed, and then I can try to think through those things as I come up with a proposal. Does that work?
Yeah.
I think it does.
That's fine. I just quickly wrote down 5 nonprofits. I don't think we should entertain somebody from Southport or should probably be mostly Sunset Beach.
Well, that'll be part of
Would
what
be something
Jamie
that we'll
works
be
out
looking
there.
into.
And
So, all right, no more. Let's carry on.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Next up is our COVID-19 protocols and practices. Mr. Jack Hobbs, our town administrator, this was yours.
Yes, it's on the agenda this week because council received it at the last meeting and wanted to discuss it at this session. The only comments I've received to date are from Mr. Borman, and I put a copy of his email in front of you. The review. Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure how you want to go through this, if anybody else has comments, or if you might want to walk through Mr. Borman's to get things started. But I'll stand on what I proposed last session.
Does any member of council got any questions or comments in regards to this?
I still see this pretty much as a first draft, and we almost should go through item by item to see if we're comfortable with that. My fundamental concern is where the authority is to make the decisions on whether somebody should be tested, somebody should be working, somebody should come in, what are the conditions in that, have been delegated down to department heads. I think that should be sort of recommendations by department heads up to the town administrator, who monitors the whole thing. The way it's written now, it starts primarily at the point where somebody's being exposed, as opposed to starting at a policy before the exposure takes place. And that, I'm a strong proponent that, starting with council leadership, town administrator leadership, departmental leadership, we should, one, go for a process that encourages vaccinations. And if vaccinations are something that the staff member does not want, then the staff member should have a regular process of getting tested to make sure they're not coming in and putting anybody else in danger. And they should wear a mask in the process. There's also a concept in there of essential workers. And a lot of these protocols are discussed in terms of essential workers. And there's flexibility in terms of treating essential workers. However, the caveat I put in there is that this policy says all staff members are essential workers. So it means there's flexibility in this for all staff members, not necessarily to get vaccinated, not to wear masks, not to have tests, not to necessarily report. And that's kind of where it's weak if it's a policy. And then go a little bit further down on the chart of actions under certain phases. I think the phases need to be more clearly defined. And as I mentioned last time, I don't agree that we are in the phase 4 plan and prepare because significant infections or deaths are possible. I think we are probably well into the pre-emergency preparation. We are having significant cases and significant deaths, and the majority of those, if one accepts the state and CDC statistics, is there's a 90% percentile that's used, starting off at about 90% of the people becoming new cases are those who have not been vaccinated, and then even higher rates of those than 90% are those that are requiring intensive care in our hospitals. Just since June, the number of cases in our hospital ICUs is 10 times what it was in June. And then the even higher percentage that sometimes is used at around 99% of those who are dying are cases where people have not been vaccinated. So I think, one of the things is to grapple with how we deal with vaccinations. And I accept that some people we will refuse for whatever reason it is, but then there must be clear steps taken to protect themselves, their families, and all of us. And it gets even more complicated now that schools are back in, football games are back in, crowds assembling are back in. And this, to me, this policy it avoids that. So, other than that, I don't have very strong opinions.
To me, the real crux of it is, how do you define where you are? What's the condition that you're trying to assess and say that I have to act or I don't have to act? And I don't know how to do that. John mentioned things about percentiles and ways to statistically analyze certain criteria, people that are coming down positive, people that are in the hospital, people that are dying. So there are ways that a statistician could tell you how to assess those things, whether you're moving from a risk condition, from risk condition 1 to risk condition 2 to risk condition 3. But to me, that's the crux of the whole thing. If you're going to react, you have to know what you're reacting to. And that's a challenge. I mean, it's a real challenge how to define that. But that's the crux of all this, and then everything else falls into place, I think. Once you know what you're trying to protect against, then you can say, for these employees or for these people. The other thing that the town faces is that summertime, you've got people coming from all over. So to assess how things are in the county, do not necessarily give you a true picture of what your risk is. So there's a number of challenges associated with this, I accept. But as John said, I think this is a draft and needs some more work. And I'd be happy to help.
I think summarizing part of it is come up with what happens before you go into what actions are taken after the testing. And in essence, that's what's missing, I think.
Right. Well, maybe I can address some of these and explain where I was coming from. But if I've learned anything over the past year and a half with this pandemic thing, theory and the politics have evolved continuously, and they'll keep changing. And so I early on, it was wanted to have something that was loose and a little bit vague, because things do change. When you talk about establishing a standard for this, that, and the other, you know, if guidance changes, we have to go back and reinvent that. And so that's why a lot of what you see is subjective. One way around that is if the council wants to have the authority to declare what stage we're in, you can certainly do that. My thought was that we weren't at that level, and that wasn't the town's practice, but that is something you can certainly do. I don't know that it, maybe I misunderstood going in, but this idea of this being an employee focus is caught me off guard a little bit. I know there's this business about masking mandates and all that, and now I guess over the past 2 months, this idea of mandatory vaccinations has come to play, and that again is a change in philosophy from even 6 months ago. And so now that's much more of a reality for a lot of employers than it was. And you know, like I say, a month ago, I wasn't sure this town council wanted to go to that extreme. We could certainly put on an effort to encourage folks to have vaccinations, but I'm not sure about you know, ongoing testing and all that for folks that don't show us a vaccination card. That feels a little intrusive to me, but that's, again, on some level, an employer's prerogative.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Nothing other than I agree with Councilman Corbett.
All right. Mr. Nerd?
Well, previously, we declared a state of emergency. Nobody had done this before. Nobody knew how to handle it. We pretty much followed the governor's direction. We took further steps, like closing the beach. We have a heads up now, and if someone wants to wear a mask, that's fine. If some of the, I'll change my direction here. Some of the reasons I've heard for not getting vaccinated, for men, it's going to make them impotent. And my favorite one is, this is the government's way of implanting a chip in me. Well, people believe that. But as a town, we have to be ready. I like all this. Not for mandatory vaccination. That's up to one's personal feelings and belief. We should encourage our employees to be vaccinated. And we certainly want all our staff and visitors to the building to feel comfortable being here and feel safe. That's all.
Mr. Phillips, you got anything?
So first, I'd like to, having not been here the last minute, I'd like to thank Mr. Hobbs for having put all that together. It's definitely going to be it's an elephant to eat for sure, and try to not only that, but coalesce the mindset of the council that you're looking to put that out for. For my stance, I'm anti-mandate. I'm also want to make sure that for those people that choose to not get vaccinated, I want to make sure that we don't do anything punitive towards them. They need to be allowed to have their choice to do what they want to do and not be punished for what their choice is. I believe in that personal freedom. That's my stance. I'm vaccinated, but I also believe that people have that right to choose what they want to do themselves. So I'm going forward. I won't support any sort of mandate for vaccinations or anything like that, or even masks at this point. I've been living my life out working through this for the past 2 years. There's a lot of people who've been doing that. There are a lot of people who are losing their jobs now because they don't have that personal choice. And I won't be any part of allowing that to happen in this town, from my perspective.
Thank you, sir. There's no further discussion on this. We'll just come back and, I guess, by the three of you basically just want him to, or actually the four, I'm sorry, Ms. Harris, would want you to look at what the questions was today, and then we can address this at a time, maybe the next meeting or the next.
Okay.
Well, Councilman Borman volunteered to help work on that. I would also be glad to help shape, define, and take into all the council views of how to do this. My bottom line is to ensure we have a safe environment for our staff and our citizens as best we can.
Yep.
So,
That's fine.
are you comfortable with that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mayor, okay to work with these folks?
I mean, that's fine.
Okay.
The only problem I have is we know exactly where these two stand. I mean, they've been obvious, tell us where to stand, and I respect that. But, just like with Mr. Phillips, with him on council, I mean, he has different views. So we don't need to do everything to a one side. It just don't need to come back to one side. I'm not saying he will, but I'm just saying
Well,
in
we'll
general.
perhaps have Mr. Borman and Mr. Phillips work together on it.
It's fine. And I agree with Tom that if you're going to have these, I agree with Mr. Hobbs, some subjectivity is good, but some things need to be automatic triggers that just fall into place. So, because in my mind too, the mayor has been very worked with us through this, although throughout all of the pandemic, he's had the total authority to do the state of emergencies as he sees fit. So I personally like the idea of, I think it was written up in there as well, of to move from the step 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, that if the mayor decides to do that after consultation with the council, he can do that with Mr. Hobbs without having to have a meeting and all that mess. It would just be a more efficient way to go about it.
That's where we're at. Good.
Okay.
All right. Yep. All right. Moving on to our new business, approval of the revised salary grade schedule. Mr. Hobbs, our town administrator.
Yes, sir. We'd like to consolidate the Public Works Department with the Stormwater Departments. I think when I got here, I was scratching my head about why they were separate anyway, because these guys work with each other, they cover for each other. During this recent time of staff shortages, they really did pull together. So I think that's the way it's operating anyway. This came as a proposal from the departments themselves, so they're certainly on board with it. The council's being asked to adjust the salary grade schedule, and other places they call it a personnel classification plan, to create these new positions. We would raise the Director of Public Works to grade 17 from 16 and create a Deputy Public Works position at grade 16, which is the same grade the Stormwater Manager carries now. So be glad to answer questions if you have them.
Council, any members of council, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Nerd.
We, since this is a personnel matter, we just did discuss this in our last closed session. And I believe we were in agreement. So unless anybody else has any questions or concerns, I have a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Do I have any more discussion?
I'd like to just,
Go ahead,
just
sir.
add a little
Go ahead.
bit. Several years back, when we set up the stormwater department and the 10-year stormwater program, it was a different situation, if you will, and different manning issues. But as we've gone over time, both the manpower in both of those departments have worked very closely together. And some of the major equipment was purchased, and when we did the budgeting, half went to stormwater and half went to DPW. So the reality is they've been functioning as a team pretty much since the beginning. And so this just kind of makes it official and formalizes that relationship. So it's a sort of a rational and a beneficial step, I think.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything?
I agree with the.
Okay. All right. Well, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. All right, moving on to a disposition of directives. I know that we have we'll be relooking at the nonprofit situation. What day would y'all, or what meeting would y'all like to add that to? The 11/16 maybe?
Yeah.
That'll give you a few,
Let's
give you a few weeks to
give
get
you
all
some-
that done and give you a little time.
Yeah.
And then also for the dredging, which we said we'd have another report on that, so let's just move that to the 11/1 if council's good with that.
Don't we have,
That might, we'll move as quick as we can. We hope to have a
Okay.
report next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
Yes, I think we need to discuss infrastructure. One of my concerns is with all the houses being built, where's our fire department going to stand in 5 years? Are we putting in the capital improvement program is just for equipment and vehicles? Should we be saving money now to increase the fire department? And as far as infrastructure goes, we need to, I think we need to start working with the county and do something. I mean, these new developments, you don't see any turn lanes, you don't see any widening of roads. If we don't start working on that now, we're going to have gridlock.
So you want to add that to the disposition of directives? At
Mhm.
least, I would say at least without the 11/16 before we address this.
That would be fine.
Okay.
could I ask a question? And this is Chief Hasselmeyer. Do you have any feedback on the status of the grant that you applied for to get three positions that would be paid for 3 years?
6 full-time positions.
6, okay.
Good or bad.
Okay. Is there a deadline on that grant being decided by whoever's giving away the money?
The speed of government.
Oh well.
Not our government.
All right.
So who's going to take the lead and
Definitely with him addressing the fire department, of course, I would hope that Paul would give some kind of insight on that.
yeah, but it
It's
also would
going as
be
far as the fire deal and all that stuff. And then as far as the infrastructure,
planning?
I would say Chad. Chad would be the best one to look into that. You all agree?
Yes.
That makes sense, but I have a question though. I thought that with these subdivision plannings, that they have to address that type of stuff, like turning lanes and things like that, as a part of their plan. Isn't that something that's included as what they submit?
I mean, that's something that Chad would know. I don't think Chad's in here today, but
No.
that's something that he would know as far as that. But I remember that being too, that they had to do certain things. But
There are traffic volume
Defined?
issues that they look at,
Yeah.
but I don't know the answer whether things like turn lanes and widening roads, where that comes in.
Do we have someone from the county that we work with? Or state?
NCDOT.
I thought the
those
county
are-
because they're the ones that are approving these plans for these subdivisions.
all right. Anybody else? Not. We're moving on to the public comments. Anyone have any public comments for Dan? Go ahead. Go ahead, ma'am.
Katie Hovermail, 1429 Bay Street, and it's not as much as a comment as a suggestion and a clarification. And I did not, in my comment earlier, wish to imply that the police department was not doing a good job. Chief Claymore and his staff have a lot on their hands in the summertime, and I appreciate the presence that they try to provide all around the town. It's not just the island, but the town that they have responsibility for. And there's no way to really police the amount of the ignorance, which is not to be demeaning, but the lack of education that a lot of people have driving golf carts, especially if they're renting a golf cart and don't have a lot of experience with it. So it's a very difficult job with the police, I'm sure. And since we brought up the fire department, I'm just wondering, there have been instances where fires have started with golf carts under the house, and I wonder if there is a regulation for rental companies to ensure that where they deliver a golf cart, and knowing that there are older homes on the island, is the connection safe enough for plugging in a golf cart. I don't know if there's a requirement that the fire department has for inspecting homes that have golf carts. And the golf cart problem is not just in Sunset Beach. I've observed the same amount of ignorance in other towns along the coast. You know, people that are not abiding by the rules of regulating driving a golf cart with the regulations in place. On a positive note, I actually saw a man driving a golf cart last week, and he had a toddler in the golf cart belted in a child seat. And that is the very first time I've seen a child in a golf cart that was belted in properly. As far as the parking regulations go, it's just a suggestion that might make it easier for Chief Claymore and the other policemen to regulate. It seems to be a problem of, particularly on Main Street on the island, where there's just a limited amount of space between the bicycle lane and the sidewalk. And I wonder if it would be easier to, instead of eliminating that phrase, at least 3 feet from the edge of the pavement, in addition to eliminating that phrase, if you said parking was such that no part of the vehicle impeded the pavement or sidewalk. And maybe that, because I know that the police department has done a very good job of educating people who park with their wheels on the bike lane or wheels on the sidewalk, and that is becoming well known. So, and I know it's on the marquee too, that says keep your wheels. So just a suggestion. Thank you very much.
Thank
you, Katie.
Anyone else?
Rich Serrato, 517 Twisted Oak Lane. I'm just curious. I composed a letter to the Beacon regarding Jaguar's Lair. The contract, if I recall, when I was on the council, expired February of 20. What is the status of Jaguar's Lair? Why hasn't the town taken the appropriate action in this quote unquote ironclad agreement that we made in February of 20? It is now September of 21. You can theoretically say it's October. What is going on? Does anybody know? They have used every possible excuse not to finish the infrastructure. We've spent thousands of dollars of attorney fees to develop an ironclad agreement a couple of years ago, and John was present. Councilman Corbett was present. What is the status? What are we afraid of? There are people that have purchased lots there for years, and they spent a heck of a lot of money, $200,000-300,000. Now they're worthless. So I'm really concerned for them. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? All right. Next up, we'll be going into closed session to discuss, put my glasses on so I can read this a little right. Pursuant to 143-318-11A3, to consult with the town attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privileges between the attorney and the council, which privilege is hereby acknowledged, and pursuant to 143-318-11A5, to establish or instruct the public body staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body in negotiating the price and other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, lease, or exchange. Do I have a motion? We go into closed session. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.